Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is Joe Scarice, your co-host and co-founder of the Creative Birth Strategy Podcast and House here on Clubhouse. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Let me just get myself set up so we can invite some people in and get rocking and rolling with our subject today. We provide education, networking, and strategy for real estate professionals nationwide on this podcast. Have to thank Clubhouse, as always. We are the only podcast that has a house here on Clubhouse. We offer in-person events throughout the tri-state area in North Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. And we now also offer CE accreditation courses for licensed real estate agents. And then we also offer worksheets for you to better understand how to pencil down your deals. And one other thing we have now, we have white label marketing where you can now learn how to broker and or correspond our money here at Lendmark. So we'll get started here in just a few minutes, and I'm going to start inviting all kinds of people in. Then we'll dive into our sponsorship and our events. And then we'll talk about our great subject that we put together today. Really excited about this discussion because I think it's extremely important because of where the market is going and shifting toward. So we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Alrighty. Invite some other people in here to get started. All right. So let's talk about the Creative Birth Strategy podcast itself. Okay. It's been around for a little over a year now. We're hitting close to 85 episodes. Very excited about that. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're also on TikTok now. We've expanded the social media presence quite a bit. We're pushing the agenda out there with our consistency on education. And I want to thank our sponsors, of course, as always. I want to thank Mr. Yerdal Perkins of Perkatech, who provides our social media strategy and our architecture to this entire podcast. And anything that you're seeing online, Yerdal and Perkatech are very much involved with the branding and the recognition of all my social media analytics right now that's going on right now. So I want to thank him as always. He's been a great friend and associate and the colleague of this podcast from the very beginning. I want to thank Realty 4-in-1 with Miss Linda Pelagas, who provides a national publication for real estate professionals throughout the country, as well as national events. I want to thank also MB Capital, where I am a referral partner, where we provide unsecured business lines of credit for real estate professionals throughout the country, leveraging that monies to get into deals, gap funding, gator funding. Big fans of the sub-2 community as well. So I just want to thank them. And then I want to thank Lendmark Capital, where I am a senior loan analyst providing nationwide asset-based lending for clients throughout the country. DSCR, fixed to rent, fixed to flip, new construction, multifamily, blanket loans, portfolio lending, strategy, and advisory. We're here to hopefully provide insight to the real estate professional as well. And then our new alliance that we have with Elite Deal Makers with Jim Ingersoll out of Richmond, Virginia. We are now hosting events here in Philadelphia, Lehigh Valley, South Jersey, and North Jersey on a monthly basis. And I want to thank him and his group. We're tying in with them. Very excited about our monthly events that we're rolling out. We have some great events coming up still with the rest of the month. We have Monday night, we're in Philadelphia at Newbold Exchange, where my offices are with Yerdal Perkins of Perkatech. And then Wednesday night, we're at the Bethlehem Brewworks Fegley's up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And then we're at February 27th. We're down at the 903 Brewery on the 27th for a panel discussion in Jersey City. So I'm pretty excited about that. And that's where Elite Dealmaker, North Jersey will be situated up there as well. We're also rolling out a ton of asset-based lending fundamental workshops. Keep an eye out for those. Please connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, wherever you feel most comfortable to stay connected with our updates on education, motivation, and strategy. And our discussion today, the Section 8 loophole in real estate investing. Now, I did put a poll out this past week, and an overview to the discussion on LinkedIn as well as the other social media sites. As a landlord navigating the Section 8 loophole in real estate investing, understanding the key factor is crucial. The Section 8 loophole pertains to strategies utilized by investors to optimize rental income and mitigate risk when renting to tenants, benefiting from the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The initiative ensures landlords receive consistent rent payments, making it an appealing choice for real estate investors seeking stability and guaranteed income. In the realm of real estate investing, particularly with Section 8 properties, the most critical factors in comprehending the dynamics of the program and leveraging its benefits effectively. By grasping the nuances of Section 8 regulations and rental procedures and tenant selection criteria, landlords can ensure a smooth and profitable rental experience while providing essential housing support to those in need. Navigating the Section 8 loophole requires a strategic approach, emphasizing the importance of maintaining property standards, fostering positive tenant relationships, and adhering to the program guidelines. By prioritizing transparency, communication, and proactive property management, landlords can capitalize on the advantages offered by the Section 8 program while safeguarding their investments and cultivating a mutual benefit rental environment. And what is this telling me based on the current market condition? Every conversation I'm having with an investor, they're comparing the market rent to Section 8 rent. Does Section 8 rent make sense? Does the property cash flow based on Section 8 numbers? They're not even worried about the market rent. They're worried about the Section 8 voucher and how that will impact their bottom line on cash flow. They're concerned about the tenant landlord relationship. They feel more comfortable that they have a little more control of the tenant when it's in regards to Section 8 housing. Listen, our rates are leveling out around 7% this past week. The market is very strong for investors. Okay. This is not a home buying environment right now. Home buyers are sitting on the sidelines thinking values are going to come down one day. I just don't see that happening. I can't see more than a 10 to 12% decrease in values overall. So what happens? It's becoming a rental market. And then, this is another thing. Post Super Bowl, we have Super Bowl today, of course, is your spring market. What are we going to see in this spring market? What is the move from an investor perspective? Are they going to get even more aggressive with asset-based lending availability and monies into the market? We have job reports that are looking okay this past week. U.S. economy added about 143,000 jobs in January. Unemployment rate fell kind of to about 4%. Your treasury yields are very bullish right now, so we've got to see where that all kind of leads into. Mortgage rates end the week lower despite Friday's modest bounce, so we're still around 7.03. I mean, our rates are in the investment space around 7.8, which is not bad. I mean, properties are cash flowing, so people are coming off the sidelines there. Some top cities you want to watch for rental activity in 2025, and we'll just go through those ones to watch. Number one is Minneapolis, making a recovery there from some craziness in the past 4 or 5 years. Atlanta, Overland Park, Kansas, in Kansas City area. Cleveland, Ohio, which I'm not a big fan of Cleveland right now. I think it needs some work there comparatively to some of the other Ohio cities. Washington, D.C., or the greater D.C. market is becoming very strong in the rental space. Santa Rosa, California. Detroit, the greater Philadelphia market, greater Chicago market, and the greater Cincinnati market are markets to watch on the rental home fronts. So let's get to some of our moderators today. I'm going to start with Mr. Joseph Martello, who's making a special guest appearance because he's a Section 8 king of South Jersey. Joseph, good morning and welcome. Brief overview, who you are, what you do, and thoughts to Section 8 loophole in real estate investing.
Good morning, Joe. I wouldn't call me the king of Section 8, right? But thank you. It's very flattering. So, I mean, Section 8 is, I know for some they find a challenge, right? I have several Section 8 rentals, and I've heard horror stories that folks are going through, but with Section 8, you need to just keep on being persistent. It also depends on the people that are fostering the the program, which usually work for the county, at least in the state of New Jersey. Um, a lot of people complain about tenants, and I really haven't had any issues with tenants. You do your same vetting on those tenants as you would as any other. Um, you can't discriminate just because they're on Section 8. But for the most part, I mean, when you got to do rent increases, you have to do it within the 60-day period. I usually do it at the 120-day mark because they are just, the people processing the paperwork are just slow in doing so. As far as loopholes, I really don't see any, but haven't really had any issues with the tenants paying their share of the rent. For the most part, that's all paid. It's a lot more. Everybody says it's generally a 70-30 split. It's a lot more than, they're paying a lot more than 70% Section 8. I've had instances where Section 8 was paying 100% of the rent. Case in point, on one of my rents is $1,750. The tenant's only paying $118 a month. So there's a lot of that factors that go in there. So as far as the rental market and Section 8 and the rental market, it all depends on the market, right? And when I say market for Section 8, it goes based on county and zip code. So you look at the county, you look at the zip code, and then the rents are there. And, for instance, you can't just go based on the township, because I can tell you that there's a township in New Jersey that has 3 zip codes, and each zip code has a different rental price for whether it's bedrooms and bathrooms, right? Has a different rental price for each zip code. Doesn't really make too much sense, but that's the reality of it. So it does go based on zip code. So pay mind to that. They have done a good job in bringing those rents up to Section 8. In some markets, it's a little below, but slightly. And in some markets, I would tell you that they're driving the market rent up for the regular folks, where the Section 8 rent increase has been significant enough. And the really reason why is because there is, we all talk about a lack of housing, but they boosted those rents. They boosted those allowances up.
So Joe, you run an event for more newer or even mid experienced investors, dinner and deals in the South Jersey corridor. Does Section 8 come up in the discussion? Is there a concern? Is there a fear as a landlord? Like, what's the thought pattern? Just because I don't think people realize there's kind of like 2 types of Section 8 housing. There's the project-based Section 8 housing and the resident-based housing. So we're primarily resident-based housing. Has that discussion come up in your dinner and deals in regards to being a landlord and comparing it to Section 8 to market rents?
Yeah, I mean, running during deals, and I'm looking forward to bringing that to elite deal makers, especially, and I'm looking to talk about being a W-2 investor in March.
Yes.
You and your group, Joe. But yeah, the discussion does come up, and it's a lot of stereotypes and generalities that do come up. They're going to wreck the place. Dealing with Section 8's a hassle. Dealing with the tenants is a hassle. You can never get them out. And I got to tell you, my experience has been completely opposite. I can tell you that the landlords sometimes aren't the greatest. It takes 2 to tango, right? I just bought a place last year. Just got the year anniversary notice from my accounting software, and the lady was there for 15 years. She's Section 8, and the carpet's actually a disaster. I mean, now to the landlord's credit, she was only paying $800 a month. At least Section 8 was, but he never raised it to the market rent of $1,350. So whose fault is that? But I mean, like I said, there's some landlords. You have a tenant that's in long term. You treat it well, they're gonna take care of you. These are human beings. They're people. I mean, granted that some people are not the greatest, right? We all know that. There's good and bad in everything. But that's where your vetting comes in. And you have a responsibility to do that vetting. But you have to manage the program. right? It's a program that's paying you. You need to manage it just like you manage a tenant.
Interesting information. Thank you. There's certain things that we have to determine a resident's eligibility in Section 8 housing. One is income, one is family size and composition, one is citizenship, one is eviction history. Joe, can you get one final point? What's your thoughts on that four prong approach to identifying the right Section 8 in your world?
Identifying the right Section 8, I mean, it goes down to, are you talking about the program or are you talking about the tenants?
The tenants itself, screening the tenants for Section 8 too, as well.
It's the same thing, right? It's the same screening that they would go through in a regular tenant, right? You're going to look at their criminal history. You're going to look at their credits. You're going to see what outstanding bills they have. You're going to make sure that whatever the housing assistance program split, they can cover that. They're going to come with a voucher. You're going to ask them what your split is, and you're going to look at for the income to make sure that they can afford that split. Now, keep in mind, Section 8, the housing assistance program, is also looking at their income and making sure that they can afford it. But, people sometimes are irresponsible with that money. How do they get, do they work? How do they get back and forth to work? Your interview all goes based off of, how you would just handle a regular tenant. There's a whole lot more paperwork that goes on, inspections that happen, that annually and the initial move-ins inspection. But once you get them in Section 8, generally they're not leaving. Because you got to remember, it's very tough on them to leave. They have a 60-day window to generally they'll have a 60-day window to find a place. So they got to give you 60 days notice, and then they have 60 days notice, so that voucher becomes a problem for them. So, moving for them is a hassle just as much as turnover is for you. So they're not looking to move. So you put a little bit of work on the front end, and you almost have a renter for life, if you will. And you just got to take care of the place like you should.
Joe, thank you as always. Appreciate your insight, and it was great having dinner with you on Friday night. We do have pictures and evidence that you did have dinner with us. Just want to let you know that. Just to let your followers know.
Good, Joe. Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to go to ladies next. Miss D, good morning and welcome. Brief overview who you are, what you do, and thoughts to the discussion today, the Section 8 loophole in real estate investing.
Good morning. Good morning, Joe, and good morning to the room. So I'm Donna Page, a long-term buy and hold investor, currently investing out of the Milwaukee, Wisconsin market primarily. However, we do invest over 9 states here in the country. And Section 8 is definitely one of the programs that we found to be one of our most profitable profit centers for our tenants. What we're finding in many of the markets currently is that our Section 8 rental rates are trending about 15 to even 20% in the Midwest above standard market rates. So what we do in our business model is we renovate all of our homes to Section 8 standards. Now, we don't specifically market only to that particular demographic, but if someone does show up with a voucher, we are able to accommodate that family. Joe, as the other Joe mentioned, one of the things that we found is that the overwhelming majority of our voucher holders are working class families. So these are people that do work. Maybe, they might be underemployed or don't work in high-paying industries. So they do have that voucher to support them to have a nice place to live. And those tenants do stay, we call them homesteaders within our business, because they will, once they're in that property, generally they are, staying put, which means we don't have the turnover. We're getting that slightly higher rental rate. They're paying, they're paying on time. It's just we've had very, very, very good success. I've only had one problem tenant that I can think of, and she was just annoying more than anything else. And she also, we felt like was better suited for project-based housing versus, the voucher-based housing. But we're really big fans of this program. It really does help a lot of American families out, and it's been a great portion of our business. So thanks for having me today.
Donna, thank you. And some quick question. What homework would you think a newer landlord needs to do when it comes to Section 8 and occupying it with a Section 8 tenant? Like any pointers that you learned as you went that kind of remind you when I ask you that question, it reminds you of something like what kind of homework should you do before you occupy the unit with a Section 8?
So one of the things that I always tell people is we have to remember that these are, again, generally working families. So we want to make sure that we're not just throwing the worst of our portfolio at this particular demographic. If you renovate these properties and make sure that they are, nice, clean, safe properties, generally these families are going to be very, very grateful to have a nice place to live. But also keep your current screening criteria in place. You don't have to accept any and everybody that shows up with a voucher. You do want to run those criminal background checks, your eviction histories, all the other things that you would normally do. The only difference that you should be making is instead of having them qualify for the 100% of the rent, just for their portion of the rent. And if you keep those screening criteria in place, you'll more than likely get a good tenant there. So that's my 2 cents.
One last question, because comes to mind. When it comes to utilities between landlord and tenant, any advice you can provide for anybody to be like in regards to water, electric, gas? What are certain steps that you should do to protect yourself as a landlord with Section 8 tenant, where it doesn't bite you in the ass, excuse my French, down the road?
Absolutely. Make sure that those utility bills are coming to your office, that you keep an eye on them. So in many jurisdictions, particularly with water and those municipal services, that bill is tied to the address, not necessarily the name of, that the bill is on. So you want to make sure that those bills are coming to your office so that if things get a little out of whack, you can stay right on top of that tenant. The other thing that we do, Joe, is in our lease, we say that if a tenant has a arrearage on utilities, we can pay that off, but then charge it back for them on rent. And if they do not pay that in their next rental cycle, that's cause for eviction. That is in our lease because we don't want to be stuck with, these high utility bills for those tenants that, may move away or something may happen. They may be put off the program and that kind of thing. So definitely stay on top of that.
Donna, thank you as always. I appreciate your presence here on a week-to-week basis. Listen, we are here to provide hopefully some form of direction. Our opinions 100% on mark? Maybe not, but listen, we're giving a very raw thoughts to what we're thinking when it comes to real estate investing, from a lending perspective, from a landlording perspective, from a contracting perspective, from a liability perspective. So you need to these suggestions are really to ensure you to be landlord ready, to be investor ready. And I think the discussion today is very important because the discussion at DSCR is much different now than 10 years ago. I can tell you for a fact that there were banks out there that would shy away from Section 8 rentals. We do not want to have that on our balance sheet. And now, I mean, I'm sure they have their foot in their mouth because that's to me, in certain urban settings, such as the Philadelphias, the Chicagos of the world, and, New Yorks of the world, and St. Louis's of the world, and Atlantas of the world, Section 8 housing in certain areas in some of these markets are the go-to on compare to market rent. So I really think a lot of banks are changing their tune because they don't really have another option, or they won't be lending their money. And if banks are not lending money, they're not making money. Stephen, good morning and welcome. Thank you for your patience. Brief overview, who you are, what you do, and thoughts to our discussion this morning, the Section 8 loophole in real estate investing.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm Steve Franco, RNA homepage, broker, investor, working with a lot of wholesalers who are getting licensed in PA now, and also lining up to possibly build 2 self-storage facilities, so that can become fun. I mean, we've been doing, as many people know, at least in this part of PA, you don't have to take Section 8. You have a complete choice. I think it's throughout the entire state. But we've always had friends and market. People said, you treat your tenants great. You give them the same quality apartment. I do all of my apartments to Section 8 standards, LVP, really nice places where they look around and say, wow, I feel respected. They feel respected. Most of the time, they'll respect you back. You have to also screen them just like anybody else. They have to make 3 times whatever their rent is, backgrounds, whatever. And I read on a forum on Facebook yesterday, does anyone add the Section 8 clauses to their lease? Which I still can't figure out what these clauses are. No, all of the leases should be the same. You sign the Section 8 lease, they sign your lease, yada, yada. And the biggest thing that I love about Section 8 is the annual increases. We've taken over so many management clients who haven't done the annual increases. We go in, we're only limited to $100 increase every turn. So if you're $500 behind, it's going to take a long time to catch you up on where you should be on your rents. And work with your Section 8 inspector. I actually had never thought of what somebody else said is look for the towns that have better Section 8 rents. We pretty much buy properties that fit our portfolio and then go from there. But work with your inspector. Make sure they understand you're a legit landlord. So when you call them with a tenant issue, that's been the best part for us. Is we call the Section 8 caseworker and say, hey, XYZ is doing ABC that's bad. They immediately pick up the phone, call the tenant, and say, listen, straighten out, or we drop you from the program. Straighten out or whatever. Treat Section 8 like your friend. Treat the tenant with respect. And you're absolutely right, Joe, that in many cases, and it's true up here, Section 8 rent's a little bit better than market rent. But we don't do anything to focus on Section 8. I think we put it on the affordable housing website. But it's been a really great experience. It is the only long-term subsidy program that we accept. These other nonprofits in our area, we've gotten burned by most of them. So it really has worked out really well. I don't know if there's any real loophole for us other than just make sure you're treating them with respect and make sure that everyone signs every lease. That would be my last thing, is there is no, Section 8 thinks she's paying me $180, but she's actually paying me $280. No. First of all, it's not valid. Second of all, it could be federal fraud.
So, Steve, let me ask you a couple questions since you're so familiar with this from a management and ownership perspective. What are some of the main elements that inspectors check? Is it smoke detectors? Is it the mechanicals? Is the cleanliness and safety of the property? A little of everything, functioning utilities, safe and secure doors, windows, and locks. Walk us through an inspection if you can. Maybe something more recent for you that you've experienced with a Section 8 inspector.
Yeah, that's a great question. Wilkes-Barre City, for example, they have some towns. Remember, your town municipal inspection does not get trumped by Section 8. If your town has an inspection, you're doing too. That's just the way it is. And what we found is the towns are usually more mechanical. Does hot water run? Does cold water run? Are there smoke detectors? Yada, yada. And Section 8 does hit those, and they hit GFIs too. But the towns are usually stopping there. The Section 8s are usually going to peeling paint. They're usually going to, your lattice going up your deck stairs has some broken pieces of lattice. So, okay, you got to re-lattice that. I guess more of a child safety angle. Like we actually had one Section 8. The building is asbestos siding up 40 feet. And it had been painted. It was peeling like 30, 40 feet up. They made us get up there and scrape it down and repaint. The theory was paint would fall, yada, yada, whatever. But they were going to a much more extreme comfort level. I do kind of call it like an FHA inspection. A little more of a comfort level thing, but also a little more child safety seems to be the angle. And they're also the first ones to comment on, although we usually don't have this problem, but I've seen it in some of my clients' properties. Well, this carpet has a tear. The city inspector is going to walk right by that. The Section 8 is going to be a little more picky, I guess. But at the same time, same thing. If you're good with the inspector and you're friendly, and if they say jump, you say how high. You really want to keep it that relationship. But they're much more the comfort ones. Kind of like the FHA inspection. The FHA appraisal is actually an inspection, and they're looking for little stuff. I find it to be a little more like that in the Section 8 world too, compared to the city guys who are much more, I guess, lackadaisical on the little stuff.
Interesting stuff. So I appreciate that. We're going to talk about some common myths of Section 8 that I think people are, I guess, misconstrued by just other people's thoughts. Myth number one, Section 8 tenants are hard to deal with. Difficult tenants exist across all income levels. The trick is screening. Check references, run background checks, and follow your gut. Okay? Myth number two, the government controls everything. Yes, HUD has rules, but you're still the landlord. And you set your lease terms, screening tenants and managing your property. And myth number three, Section 8 rent isn't competitive. In 2025, many housing authorities have increased payment standards to keep up with rising rents. And in some markets, Section 8 even outpaces what you get from market rate tenants. So you got to screen like a pro. You got to plan for inspections. You got to build relationships with housing authorities and be realistic about repairs. What about selling or evicting Section 8 tenants? I know a lot of people that sell properties off with Section 8 in place. And a lot of newer investors like that. They like the turnkey, I don't want to call it turnkey, but more of a key operational property. They know what the income looks like on the bottom line if they're putting 20 or 25% down. So the bottom line is, Section 8 is a tool. It's not a magic wand. If you're looking for consistent income and longer-term tenants, it's a great option. But it does require planning, organization, and willingness to adapt. Felix, good morning and welcome. Brief overview, who you are, what you do, and thoughts to our discussion this morning, the Section 8 loophole in real estate investing.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody. Felix Buchanan Sr. I am a wholesaler, investor. I help investors with rehabbing their projects and getting the return on investment that they're looking for. I've been working with Section 8 since about 2006. And I find it to be very fruitful. I agree with pretty much everything that everyone has said thus far. I'm very good at screening the tenants, just making sure that they are going to pay their rents on time, that they do qualify. I'm very good at doing the walkthrough of the property for the inspection, checking everything from the toilets, the tubs, the cabinets, flooring, just making sure that everything meets their standard so that when the inspector comes in, I don't have to have them come back out. I do build relationships with every inspector so that there's never an issue with me, as well as I've built relationships with some of the people on the inside, the caseworkers, so that they understand that when they're working with me, here's, I like to make the process as streamlined as possible because I do understand the program. I predominantly have done it in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, Baltimore County, and Arundel County. So very seasoned as far as that goes. But again, they're just like regular tenants, other than the fact that their rents are being subsidized. I do quarterly inspections the first year or 2 years that I do have a Section 8 tenant, just to confirm that they're not damaging the property. They're making sure that they're keeping the property upkept. If I do go in there and something's wrong, they have 7 days, which is in my lease, to fix it. Or on the 8th day, I send my guys to come in and fix it. And it becomes a fee for them in their rent. So thus far, knock on wood, I've had no bad experiences, whether it was Section 8 RHP, due to the screening and me just actually talking to the tenants ahead of time throughout the process. I asked them, different questions about who they are, what things that they've done, because those things give you a lot of answers as to how to deal with them. And that information helps you prepare to whether or not you would choose them or not choose them. I've denied some just because of, some of that information that I've gotten, but I've had a great experience since 2006 with dealing with any Section 8 tenants.
So, Felix, I think Baltimore is consistently getting a bad rap. Okay. So from a Section 8 perspective, if I was a new investor, what are some things that you would want to bullet point to somebody that's never bought a property before? I'm going to buy my first investment property, but I want to go Section 8 because I feel like my check's going to come in every month. What's your thoughts on either doing a light rehab or taking on a property that would be considered turnkey? And what suggestions you would have in the Baltimore market? Because I think people really have a bad image of Baltimore than more than the greater Baltimore area. You know what I mean?
Yes. Key components, just make sure that you're very thorough with your paperwork as far as your leases. Make sure that you explain everything to a team, to the tenant. Make sure that any and everything that you feel as though that would be any type of issue to you as a landlord, that you put that in your lease and you have them initial it so that there's no question as them saying, oh, well, you didn't explain this to me or you didn't say this to me. I explained it to you and you initialed it. I think that Baltimore just gets a bad rap overall because it's Baltimore, and what people kind of look at it in that scope. That Section 8 and BRHP platform, even Baltimore County Housing Choice Voucher Program, everything has been pretty smooth. I haven't had a lot of, again, in my experience, but I would tell everybody just be thorough with your paperwork and what you're explaining to the tenant.
Somebody has an interesting question, Felix. I don't know if you could answer this.
Sure.
This one gentleman had, or young lady had a property manager manage apartment and later discovered a tenant had walked out 2 months before the lease expiration. They terminated the property manager, and they wondered if HUD still could cover the 2 months the tenant didn't pay. Tenant can't afford. I mean, they're not going to bridge anything like that. Like if somebody's in financial hardship, they're not going to bridge money for a tenant, correct?
That is correct. But the thing about it is, was it just what the tenant owed, or did Section 8 did not pay for those 2 months would be the
question. Yeah, they're not going to pick up the difference. Yeah, they're not going to pick up the difference.
Different. No, you got to take them to court for that. You got to file failure to pay, and Section 8 rent court is different from regular rent court.
Yeah.
Always keep that in mind.
Yeah, it says the individual said the entire rent and Section 8. So
again, Section 8 needs to pay that because you signed a HAP contract that made them responsible until the end of the lease term.
Yeah, I would think so because they can't pay the difference that's responsible to the individual. Correct. But I mean that would make no sense to me in my mind. Right. But I still think there's some great opportunities to think about when it comes to the pros and cons of Section 8 housing. Like what Felix said, and I don't want to ruin Felix's voice. Felix, it sounds like your voice is getting beat up a little bit with the weather. Yeah, so I thank you for coming in there. Yeah, no problem. I've known Felix, my gosh, it's over, yeah, 20 close to 20 years now. Yeah, exactly. By the way, I'm going to be in Baltimore at the Baltimore RIA on Tuesday night. Just want to let you know. So if you're
in Houston right now,
living the dream. All right. So some pros and cons of Section 8 housing: consistent rent payments, pre-screen tenants, and then tax credits. There's some tax credits out there that you got to talk to your accountant about. Some of the cons: dealing with the government. You are dealing with government. There's stricter inspections, of course. And tenants not financially qualified. I mean, if they didn't get Section 8, they wouldn't be able to pay what they're paying you. Let's be honest. There are some pros and cons here. So I don't want to paint a really rosy picture, but I also want to paint a picture where, right now, market rent is questionability. I mean, I would be focusing on markets for cash flow, not as much on appreciation, but on the cash flow and building out my cash flow reserves. And I think Section 8 you have a better option there in a consistency of cash flow if you buy the right way and do the right harder rehabs to the property. Doing the hard laminate flooring, doing a good backsplash to everything, making sure that there's not a lot of damage to the walls and kitchens and bathrooms, really solidifying some of the renovations that need to be done as a landlord up front, so you have a smoother transition as you maintain a tenant But two, when the turnover comes, would be the concern I have. We're going to our next moderator who's new, who's a colleague of ours, Mr. David Ingamy. David, brief overview who you are, what you do, and thoughts to our discussion this morning, Section 8 loophole in real estate investing. Dave, can you unmic?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Dave Ingamy. As Joe mentioned, I'm actually new to the app here, but I have handled lending, title insurance, and most recently property and casualty insurance in the real estate space. I recently joined Joe's team in the lending space to assist him. He's been extremely busy, and I just literally joined his team over the last week, so I'm happy to be here. I will be a voice for some of you out there who will be dealing with Joe on some of the lending for these properties. And my experience in investment properties, I've never owned Section 8 myself, but I have had up to 7 investment properties myself in the past, and I deal with a lot of them in the title space particularly. I have some investors that continue to use me, and we're very versed on getting those to the table.
So Dave, real quick question before your tea pops, I could hear in the background. So is there any difference in the property and casualty insurance that you see or that is recognized because it's Section 8 housing comparatively to standard housing? Market rate.
Actually, great question. And no, the search work is the same. There's a little more paperwork that our processing team has to do on the back end, but the person who is ordering the search would not see that. So to the end user, there is no difference.
Okay. And I appreciate your time there, Dave. Dave, feel better? And it sounds like Dave caught himself a cold.
Yeah, Joe, you were sick. I think you gave it to me.
I'm doing much better after a week of rehabilitation. So yes, thank you, everybody. But I really think the power of Section 8 is a stable investment in a changing market, and this market is changing. Okay, I'm seeing a unique opportunity for investors to get in a way that an investor couldn't get in 10, 15 years ago. Now, there was a question that posed by Paris, and I'll go to Donna on this. Donna, when it comes to utilities, especially water, Section 8 pays more if the landlord pays the tenant water bill. How do you mitigate the risk of the tenant runs up the water bill?
So again, one of the things that we do is we make sure that those duplicate copies come into our office every month, and we check that against their ledger just to make sure. Again, life happens. Sometimes people may be off by a month or so, but we never let it go too far before we will actually pay that bill and then bill it back to the tenant if necessary, because those water bills do follow the property. For our single family homes, that's always tenant responsibility. For the multifamily properties that we have, we will bill that back as it's written in the lease. We bill it back, and it's just paid regularly, just as a part of their standard monthly payment. The price just varies depending upon their usage, but we never let it get any farther than. Sometimes they'll go again. They may miss a month and then catch up the following month, but we never let it get out any more than about 60 days because certainly earlier in our business we were definitely burned a time or two by people, having a really big bill that they built up and they just couldn't get from under it. And, ultimately, in most jurisdictions, if that bill is not caught up by a certain point, the municipality will either add it to the taxes or just bill that owner back separately. So we just stay on top of it.
Donna, it's really ironic because I work with a couple landlords, as you know, that have multiple portfolios of Section 8. And the biggest thing they get pissed off about is they get stuck with a collection bill they didn't know about on some type of a utility that transferred back to them, and they were never notified, ever. The mail never got to them to tell them that they owed the money, and then it became a collection, and that was the only way that they found out about it and had to resolve it, and it impacted their personal credit. Have you ever had a situation like that?
No. Thank God. No, I've never had that happen. But again, but we have been stuck with a bill or two. And after that, we just call the municipalities and we'll say, you know, this bill is billed to that home, but we are the owners. Can you just send a duplicate copy? I've never had a municipality deny us that request. Not ever.
Good to hear that. Listen, I like reliability of income in uncertain times such as now, and I think Section 8 is definitely one to recognize. Finding the right location is key. You got to financially plan the long-term success of the Section 8 investment property. There's definitely some really good cities out there poised for growth, especially in the Section 8 environment. Got to do your homework. You got to be on the ground, boots on the ground, and attend and be part of that market before you just jump in off site or out of state. Building a strong foundation is so important when it comes to Section 8 housing and investing for a brighter future for communities. So I really think there's some really great pros here that you have to look at, but you have to be careful because not every tenant's going to think the same way that you're thinking. Bob, good morning and welcome. Brief overview who you are, what you do, and thoughts to our discussion, the Section 8 loophole in real estate investing.
Good morning, Joe. So my name is Bob Chesick, President of Chespin Corporation, doing LLC setups. I'm not here to give legal advice. So Section 8 has always kind of been something outside my wheelhouse. So it's been fascinating listening to this because I've had clients who've gotten into Section 8 housing with extremely mixed, mostly bad to disastrous results. Excuse me. My very first client ever that we took for Chespin was to set up a holding company for a real estate investor who took his childhood home in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and turned it into a Section 8 housing project because of where it was located. Sadly, he didn't do the due diligence. He kind of jumped into it, and the house ultimately became a teardown because the tenants absolutely destroyed it. So listening to the due diligence part of this, making sure that you do your proper vetting and everything, absolutely a necessity. Now, I always grew up whenever I heard about Section 8 housing, and maybe this is growing up in Scranton where the mentality is a little different. And maybe Steve, I don't know if Stephen can even speak to this, but Section 8 was always just associated as, for lack of a better phrase, a dirty word. And it was not only, you don't want to be involved with Section 8, you don't want to be involved with the people who live in Section 8. Now, small towns, that's kind of what happens. But to hear how it's evolved, and not only evolved, but the most surprising thing I heard, and I'm sorry I don't remember who said it, is that you can actually make more money in some cases, depending on the market, by accepting Section 8. So I learned a lot today just listening to this, and I thank everyone for that. It'll help me in the future should I get somebody else who wants to do Section 8 housing. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but at least when they're talking about some of the stuff, it'll be a lot more familiar to me. But yeah, I appreciate everything everyone's saying, and I personally learned a lot about this today. So thank you.
I think, Bob, what's happened in the last, I would say, really quick in the last 5 years, more so than the last 10 to 15 years, is property management and property managers are so more involved in the day-to-day operations of a Section 8 rental, where more landlords 10, 15 years ago were self-managing and all the liability fell on themselves. And a lot of them weren't really good landlords. They just weren't good communicators. And it gave the whole stigma of the industry of Section 8 rentals a bad taste in people's mouth. I think there's more management companies that are very proficient in the Section 8 space and discussing the varied pros and cons to structure a good Section 8 environment for a tenant and landlord now than ever before because of software, AI, companies that all they focus is on property management. That's all they focus on, 110%. So like there's property management companies that won't even do market rents anymore. They'll just focus on Section 8 rentals. And I think that's the difference, why Section 8 has become so more appealing to an investor because they feel like they have a group of experts at day one going into that rental. Does that make sense? And Joe, would you like to give some insight, Joe?
Yeah. I just wanted to add on to that, right? I mean, because you hear these horror stories about Section 8, and then we run to blame the tenant for it. But just like when a kid is doing something bad, you say, "Where are the parents?" I'm going to ask, where was the landlord? Where was the property owner? Where was the property manager to allow the property to get into that much disrepair? I mean, if you're running the house like a slum, you're going to have those horror stories because then you're not doing repairs and you're not treating your tenants with respect. Um, and I think that was a key mantra here throughout all conversations with those who have Section 8 rentals, right? You treat your tenants with respect, they're going to respect the property, right? I mean, if you're not hearing from your tenants in years, I mean, shame on you. You should be checking in on them. Hey, everything okay? Doing a drive-by. I mean, I have town inspections and Section 8 inspections. So hearing a tenant ransacked it without anything going on, or at least I haven't been in properties for a couple of years, but whenever I send the handyman for a repair, I call them and say, "Hey, what did your property look like? What did it smell like?" Right? I'll ask them that. Right? Does it smell dirty? I mean, they smoking in the house. Are they destroying the property? Right? I get feedback on my properties, so I still have eyes and ears, even if I'm not there physically.
Hey, Joe, we have a question from the audience. As a newbie, this young lady, do I need to have my house approved for Section 8 before I even consider having a tenant that has Section 8? Or can the tenant just come in, tell me they are Section 8, and then get approved for it? Now, this could be different from area to area, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could talk to you about my market in New Jersey. So you would market it just as you would for a regular rental, and someone's going to come up and they're going to say, I have a voucher. Um, you know, you'll do your vetting just like you have. If you accept them, it's probably going to take you about 30 days to onboard them because you're going to have to get an inspection from Housing Assistance Program, and then they'll do the split and get you set up on payment. But it'll probably take you about 30 days to get that inspection done and get the tenant in. And then it'll probably take you about another 30 days for the payments to start rolling in. But once you're set up in the payments, you'll be fine every month. So that's the setup is a little bit of an investment, but like I said, they're generally not going anywhere. And someone called them a homesteader. I think that was D, right? So I mean, that's my front end. I mean, I'll kick it over to D if she has anything additional on that.
Do you any thoughts to that as well? And then we'll go to Stephen.
I'm so sorry. I was typing. I got a private message about the water bill, so I was typing a message. I'm so sorry. I missed the initial conversation.
Joe, why don't you revisit it? Joe?
Yeah. So the question was, it's actually in the chat. Like, how do you select someone who is Section 8? Do you have to get it approved initially, or do you just market it as regular? And I think that's kind of what I went into, right? And how to handle it. And in 30 days, getting them in takes about 30 days to get them in, with the inspections and everything, and about another 30 days to get the payment set right. But then you're good and you call them a homesteader, right?
Absolutely, that's exactly it. So we do not market our units specifically to Section 8. We renovate so that if a qualified candidate or a qualified applicant does have a voucher, that process is not slowed up in any way, shape, or form. And absolutely, it's the same way here in Wisconsin. Once they show up with the voucher, we set up a time for the inspection. We know we're going to pass the inspection because we've already done the work on the front end. And actually, most markets, except for Houston is a market that does take a little bit longer, but we're finding that most of the markets have started to sort of, catch back up with themselves, so to speak. During COVID, there were really a lot of lags as far as payments and getting those inspections scheduled. But right now, we're about 30 days out or so. And, again, with those higher rental rates, it's definitely worth the wait.
Thank you, Dee, and thank you, Joe. Hey, Steve, quick question on the back end here. Where do you see advantages and downsides to Section 8 property management right now?
So we manage both in our company, and like everyone else said, there is need to be pre-qualified before you get on the Section 8. Well, there is no Section 8 advertising list up here. But the advantages to Section 8 as far as property management, I mean, if you screen them the same and you treat them the same, in theory, you have the same quality tenant. They just have a different paying system. But the biggest advantage that we've found is having that Section 8 caseworker, I guess it's called, that if there is a tenant issue, if there is a late pay, if there is a bad activity, you've got someone to call who will put a little more leverage on the tenant without having to go to the magistrate. We've gone to magistrate less for Section 8 tenants than we have with regular tenants, because you call the caseworker and say, and they'll call the tenant and say, listen, straighten up, fly right, or lose Section 8 for, I forget if it's 5 years or forever or whatever. The point is you have that extra pressure. And also, I mean, bluntly, these people are getting a very cheap or free home. And so as long as you're giving something of value, they realize the value of it. They realize, hey, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose this nice house. My kids are settled. I don't want to lose this, really great opportunity that I can get by in a way that I couldn't another way. And we do find most of our Section 8 tenants are working. The whole, they're scum, this, that, the other thing, isn't actually true in our experience. I'm not sure where the stereotype comes from. Maybe it's really old, but in our experience, they're either working or there's a legitimate reason. Hey, there's better visibility, whatever. So we haven't found these Section 8 people are bad mantra to be at all true.
Yeah, I think, Section 8, management and maintenance can offer many benefits to landlords. I really would be leaning, as a lender, I'd be more confident knowing somebody that's newer in the business is leveraging a property management company that's proficient and efficient in their market with Section 8. Okay. I didn't have that option when I got into the single family through 4-family space up in Lehigh Valley 20 years ago. There was no property management presence. You had to self-manage. You had to be very involved, and it got very personal. And I think hiring qualified and experienced property management, I think, can share a little more compliance with the program's rules, reduce vacancy rates and turnover costs, and hopefully provide a stable source of rental income. Some of the steps that we outlined amongst our moderators today, I think, will help make most of you identify a better rental property investment and be a better landlord if you decide to take on Section 8. And I want to go to Mr. Joseph Martell to get his final thoughts on this discussion and thoughts to Section 8 loophole in real estate investing.
Joe, good conversation as always. Yeah, listen, it's not always a tenant that's wrong, right? And just like I mentioned, where was the landlord? You have a responsibility to your tenants, your residents, the program as a whole, just as much as they have a responsibility to you. It's more about than just getting that rent, right? A lot of questions about water bills and all those other intricacies that you have the same problems with regular tenants as you do with Section 8. And, the stereotype is out there. I think that's because there's good and bad in everything, both in the tenant and landlord world. So the responsibility and blame isn't just one-sided. So just keep that in mind. So don't let that get you scared, overly cautious, right? Go and learn about the program and learn who the folks are that manage it in the counties. I know it's challenging dealing with government employees, but then and then move along. That's all I have for you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. My last thoughts to this is understand your market, choose the right location, set clear investment goals, conduct thorough due diligence, secure financing wisely, and building a strong network. I think building a strong network kind of encompasses the first 5 thoughts. Bob, do we have an event room after this for you in regards to some updates?
Yes, there are major news on the Corporate Transparency Act. It's roaring back to life in a big way. I'm going to open up a room about 60 seconds after you close this one right here in the Creative Burst Strategies house. This is a major impact for all real estate investors. You need to hear it. So please join us.
Will Elon be on the call?
Unfortunately, Elon had something to do today, so he will not be done.
Bob, I've known Bob a long time. So I like to bust his chops where I could get in there. So I want to thank our sponsors today. I want to thank MB Capital, where I'm a referral partner providing unsecured business lines of credit for real estate investors and professionals throughout the country. I want to thank Mr. Yardall Perkins of Perkatech, the co-founder and co-host of this podcast and of my social media platform and social media architecture and administration. I want to thank Realty 4-in-1, Miss Linda Pelagas, as always. She's been a great sponsor and great add to my team throughout the country with national events and national publication. I want to thank Lendmark Capital, where I'm a senior loan analyst providing nationwide asset-based lending for real estate investors throughout the country. And I want to finally thank our new alliance with Elite Dealmakers, where we're now hosting events in Philadelphia, Lehigh Valley, South Jersey, and North Jersey every month. We're providing events on education and networking and strategy. We have 2 events this week, one in Philadelphia Monday night. Wednesday night, we're in Lehigh Valley. I'd love to see all of you there. And my quote this morning, do things for people, not because of who they are or what they can do in return, but because of who you are. Everybody have a great Sunday. Be well. Enjoy the Super Bowl. We'll see you next Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'll be ending the room in the next 30 seconds. Thank you.